for joining me. I release content on a Wednesday and a Sunday, so you can always catch it if you subscribe, because you get a nice little notification. There'll be a knock on your door saying, she's only going to release some extra stuff. And yes, you're right, today I do look like I might be a 1970s hippie wearing a Be Happy top. And I have to say it's quite ironic considering I'm going to talk about a gruesome murder. The irony is not lost on me, but it's been quite a negative time recently with all the COVID stuff. If you're watching this in 5 years' time, it's when we had a global pandemic. And it's time for some cheer, at least visually, in spite of the content of what I'm going to talk about today. Also, I'm going to say right at the beginning of this, the pictures that I'm going to put on are graphic. They are graphic. They are not for the weak disposition. So if you are somebody who really struggles with crime photography, be aware that there is going to be some substantially aggressive pictures in here. But it's really important for the content because it kind of shows how the murder took place and also how this person failed at any point to pull the wool over our eyes. In fact, Jodi Arias was not the cleverest criminal, though I do think she believed that she potentially had worked out the master plan murder of the century. She hadn't, but Jodi is one of those people that I think we'll all agree by the end of this has a little dose of narcissism, quite a big personality disorder, and a huge amount of ego in spite of some insecurities. I'm going to give the fact that she might have some insecurities, but she is an unusual character and one that's taken me quite a lot of time to indulge research-wise, because there are so many different attitudes, stories, documentaries that kind of cover this, even dramatisation, dirty little secret, my dirty little secret. So it has been a case that people have had a lot of opinions over. Not loads of psychological opinions, actually. That's something that I'm going to talk about today. Obviously, I've never sat with her, I've never interviewed her. I cannot diagnose her, but I can pass on the information that specialists have come to conclude about Jodi Arias. So how was she formed? So Jodi Arias is born July 9th, 1980. She's born in California. Her parents, William and Sandy, bring her up. She has one older half sister and one younger sister and two younger brothers. And to all intents and purposes, they seem a very close family, siblings-wise. So friends relate to the fact that she always appeared loved, she always appeared relatively happy, and she had these really close sibling relationships. However, one of the things that I need to bring in is there are differing attitudes regarding childhood. Jodi Arias says that she suffered quite severe abuse. This is not corroborated by anyone. It's not corroborated by her close friends. It's certainly not corroborated by her parents, and her siblings don't corroborate it either. I'm not saying that some of the things that she brings out in court are not validated. For example, physical punishment did occur. Children do get hit in the home. But what I'm saying is it's hard to actually see where this marked abuse occurs. But nonetheless, Jodi Arias says that from 7 years of age, she was basically abused as a child. She brings in issues such as her mother used to carry a wooden spoon in her purse that she could beat her with, and that her father would also use a belt. I actually grew up at a time when it was quite normal for children to be slapped quite badly. In fact, using the belt was something that was quite common in the area I lived. And fathers would often say to their children, you know, I'm going to use the belt on you, which is pretty horrifying in modern Britain. But nonetheless, that was something that was quite common. So I'm going to put it in context that this was not unheard of or unusual to some degree at the time that she's growing up. Jodi attended Eureka Union High School, but she did drop out in her 11th grade. She did get a GED in the end, but obviously things weren't perfect for her to have dropped out in that way. She was very articulate. She's incredibly artistic, quite talented in that way. When friends were interviewed about her, they said that she was a kind individual, that she was somebody with a sensitive disposition, and she was really likable. One of the things that she developed really early on was incredibly positive artistic traits. So she was great at photography, she had loads of interest in that, and that really was her passion. So even though she was working in other areas, her dream, her desire, her purpose was ideally to become a photographer. And that is something that stays with her right up until the fateful murder that takes place. In fact, there's something uncanny about the fact that photography was her passion and her dream, and it was also her downfall and her demise. So there is something spooky about that connection that we'll talk about later on. And as Jodi grew up, I'm going to be honest, there was nothing spectacular that stood out about her. In fact, I'd say, if I'm really honest, there were more positives about Jodi Arias when she was growing up than there are negatives. There were not things that would give you some leverage and insight that we are looking at someone who has a pathology to murder. So as I've noted, when we look at her psychology and background in childhood, there is nothing that screams at us that she has a great deal of potential. But that interests me because I find it compelling when we look at somebody's childhood and we try to see the activating factors that we can arguably say contributed towards somebody's actions. And often we can do that. We can look back and we can see that ingredients list of potential. But with Jodi, there really isn't that. Not when she's 21 years old and when she meets her partner, Daryl Brewer, at least. In fact, Daryl Brewer says that throughout their relationship, she was the model partner and she was somebody that he deeply respected and that he kept in contact with. In fact, Daryl Brewer is somebody who stands and has to take testimony and is used by the prosecution against Jodi Arias because of how she used him in the plan that prevailed over the murder of the man that we're going to talk about a little bit further on. So she gets together with him. That's also around the time that she chooses to leave home. Friends of Jodi Arias actually say that when she dropped out of junior high, she essentially moved out of her parents' house as well. She moved in with a boyfriend. So she's obviously somebody who early on knows how to engage in relationships that to some degree have some longevity. I mean, if you're going to move in with your partner, you're obviously looking at a loyalty and a connection, and it means that you certainly want some kind of commitment. But there are no hallmarks of what I would consider stalkerish behaviour, obsessive behaviour, even compulsive behaviour in relationships at that point. Now, one of the things that has been noted that doesn't necessarily come up a great deal in the court case, because believe me, it's well worth watching Jodi Arias's court case, is the fact that when she left home, her parents said that they saw her slide mentally. So when she left the confines of the safety of their home, albeit that she says that she received abuse from 7 years of age, they say there was a marked decline in her mental health to the point where friends would actually call her mother and tell them that she really needed help, that she was freaking out all the time, that she was very hysterical, and that to some degree, for whatever reason, she had these uncontrollable meltdowns. Now again, that's not something that Daryl Brewer, her partner, described. He described her in a very different way. But we have to take note that if her mother is getting those kind of phone calls off close peers, that says something significant about Jodi Arias's developing psychology. So as she's growing through adolescence into becoming a young adult, there is a instability about the way that she manages her life. Again, arguably, we can say that that could be a period of her adolescence, going into young adulthood is very challenging for a lot of us. It could be to do with hormones. It could be to do with feeling that you've got no foundation and security. It could be, let's give her the idea that she was physically abused, a reaction to trauma. But nonetheless, it is worrying that her friends note that she starts to freak out all the time. And they are that concerned by her behaviour that they're actually calling her mother to ask her to go and collect her. Again, could have been drugs, could have been alcohol, who knows? But certainly that instability is starting to become apparent, at least through her peers' eyes. So we could say that when you look back at her childhood, there's nothing notable. But as she grows into this young adult, mental illness could be developing. I don't know that for sure. I've never assessed her. I've watched her and I've come to my own conclusions. But nonetheless, anecdotally, through her parents, through her peers, they say that she was struggling with her mental health and actually becoming mentally unhealthy during her late teens. So when she meets Daryl Brewer, he's a bit older than her and they get together after a few years of working with one another. He's initially her supervisor and there's some clear boundaries. He doesn't want to have a relationship with a member of staff. But in the end, he has too many other conflicts in his life and he needs to reduce his position. So he goes down to the same level as she is and waiting on staff, and they connect. And at that point, they are really, really serious and they actually buy a house together. That's a huge commitment, isn't it? You're living with somebody, you're in a relationship with them, you're relatively young, and you buy a home. You can't get more committed. Also to note, he has a child. So it would be unfair of me to not note the fact that her personality, whilst it unravels, certainly at this point wasn't introducing us to any darkness. Quite the contrary, if I'm honest. Somebody who was kind, considerate, compassionate, and a loving step-parent. But things do change. During this period with Daryl Brewer, she takes another job. She gets a job with prepaid legal services. And even though she's in this connected and committed relationship, something starts to slide. One, she starts defaulting on her financial payments that she's agreed with a partner. So we're seeing something start to unravel. And secondly, she starts to reduce her connection towards him. She starts to become interested in things outside of the relationship, should we say. And they actually break up in 2006. But, again, I don't want to be that positive about Jodi Arias because I know that you're all going to be watching and thinking there is nothing positive to draw from what this woman is like. But, again, she stayed in contact with Daryl Brewer right up until her incarceration. They were friends. I always think that if you can retain a friendship with an ex, it tends to say something about your character because you've been able to manage the fallout from a breakup and also really connect with the variables that mattered in that relationship. You know, the key things that actually connected you and were worthwhile. It tends to show emotional maturity, which is really ironic because the one thing that Jodi Arias definitely doesn't have at the end of this story is what I would consider stable emotional security and maturity. And as I said, even though they had this relationship all the way through, because of that, he becomes part of her downfall. So let's just have it noted now. She was a reasonable stepmom, and he even said that when he watched her in court, he didn't recognise her at all. He was aghast when he heard her testimony. He couldn't believe the lying. He couldn't believe the manipulation. He said that the woman that he saw sat there was just totally a counter to the person that he'd once known. So is Daryl Brewer actually seeing the real Jodi Arias at that time? Or is it that she's playing a role? Is it that she's acting how she believes she's meant to act as the good, loyal partner until it becomes too challenging to continue? Or is it genuinely that back then she was a decent human being and, shall we say, fate intervened and there were a sliding doors moment where she meets somebody and it completely changes the course of her life? That's something that you guys are going to have to decide for yourself. I think I know where I am on this, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So as she's coming to the end of her relationship with Daryl Brewer in September 2006, she goes to watch a motivational speaker, and that's for her company that she's working for, and it's at a conference in Las Vegas. Las Vegas. Sin City, isn't it? That's what it's known as. So that's where she first bumps into Travis Alexander. And that's a big moment for her. Because one, he is incredibly captivating as a speaker. Secondly, he's very compelling and charismatic and funny. And she's watching. Remember, she's not in her perfect place. She's not found her genuine purpose. She's seeking it. Imagine being in a situation where somebody is talking about that in an evocative way, where they're expressing how you can find your true purpose, what matters to you, what meaning is. That can be really, really enthralling and enticing and very attractive. Go and admit it. A lot of you will have had moments where you've watched somebody on stage or you've seen somebody doing a speech. It doesn't really matter what they even look like. There's something about the way that they express themselves, and it's just captivating and attractive. And I think that undoubtedly Travis Alexander had that impact on Jodi Arias. And it seems that there is an instant attraction. She gets introduced to him by somebody there. It's a friend of Travis Alexander's, but he introduces them. And it's like their attraction is immediate.
When I first started, you can imagine, the first thing I would hear a lot of is, by the way, he's single. And I'd be like, that's right, I am. Maybe he's gonna get me.
They have a meal after the speeches are done, and they are really captivated immediately. It seems like even though there isn't an immediate physical connection, as in they don't have sex on the first date or the first night, there is a heat around the way that they feel towards each other automatically. And she's an attractive woman, he's an attractive guy. But it feels like there is something distinct about these two. There are situations in life where life introduces you to people that you really should never meet. And unfortunately, I feel like on this occasion, that's exactly what happens. So you have this guy talking about purpose and passion and motivation and being the best human you can be. And yet, in the same moment, this connection and meeting of an individual who essentially is going to connect with that so deeply on such a visceral and cerebral level that it doesn't just create this spellbinding attraction, it creates obsession. It creates an absolute fused attraction, and that can be really, really dangerous. Even though Jodi Arias lives a very long way away, like 5 hours or so away from where Travis Alexander lives, they do decide that the attraction is strong enough that they do want to give it a go. It's also really important to note that they were talking daily. They had thousands of text messages, loads of emails, loads of voice conversations. So this is growing really quickly in intensity. I know that most of us agree it's great, isn't it? I mean, everyone loves a bit of intensity. We all like that, don't we? It's that bit of the relationship that we're always like, why is it not like that anymore? And it's like, it's not like that because it was like that, you would never work and you would not be able to look after your life and you would just end up poor because love does that to you. It makes you completely unable to focus. That's why it doesn't last, that stage. But they're in that moment, and it doesn't feel like for Jodi Arias that moment ever really ends, that growing obsession becomes more and more part of her life, part of her daily experience. Travis Alexander was one of those human beings that had made good, essentially. He'd had a really difficult childhood. He was brought up in poverty. His parents were both really severe addicts. He had lots of physical violence towards himself, and eventually he was taken in by his grandparents. His grandmother he describes basically as a heroine. He said that she was somebody who saved them. Now, if you were brought up in really squalid conditions, they were so poor that often they didn't eat, and you're raised by people who don't have the resources to give you the love and care and attention, there's a really strong possibility that you're going to have abandonment and attachment issues. Now, abandonment and attachment issues are something that we carry our whole life. Even when we work through them, they're there. And that means if that we meet somebody who makes us feel completely validated, raised up, admired, those are really powerful strokes for our ego. And when we've got attachment disorder or abandonment issues, we're looking often for somebody to make us feel that that's cultivated within our lives. So even though Jodi's relationship towards Travis Alexander is pretty obsessive, initially it probably just feels quite captivating for him. And Travis Alexander actually had a blog, and part of an extract from that is, when you sleep for 4 days with a house full of kids, there isn't any food cooked. We would eat what there was, but before long, what was edible would be eaten or rot. And then what was rotten would be eaten too. So that's really challenging examples of the life that he led. And like I said, he says that his grandmother was an absolute hero. She clothed them, she fed them. He said that she was a saint and that she was the greatest woman in the world. She got them into church, she got them pointing in the right direction. She essentially was the saviour. So it examples, doesn't it, that he was probably looking for somebody to make him feel desired, wanted and enough. When your life has not given you that, you crave it. And whilst his grandma had definitely exemplified what a good human being could be, there would be wounds of that childhood. There would be pain within it. So one of the problems about Travis Alexander is that he's actually a Mormon. So he's involved in the Church of the Latter-day Saints. And there is a very clear rule in Mormonism, which is you have to be chaste. You cannot have sex, basically. You practice chastity. It's seen as a sin if you don't. So you have to wait until you get married before you go ahead and have sexual relations, which I think must take some kind of steadfast personality that I don't have. I cannot imagine how anybody would be able to hold off until marriage unless you were introduced probably 3 weeks before you went ahead with the service. I could probably manage that. I'm not trying to be objectionable to faith. I think it's great, but wow. Personally, I think that must be really challenging. And definitely, Travis Alexander finds the sexual part of Mormonism very difficult. And he does start having sex with Jodi a week after they get together. So Travis Alexander is going to be struggling. He is considered a bit of an elder at the church. He's an example, he's a peer. He's who young people will look up to. And that status is difficult if there's a conflict. So if you know that whilst you're standing and preaching to people and telling them how to be a good Mormon, that you're actually having sex with a woman behind the church's back, behind your own faith's back to some degree, it's going to challenge you emotionally, socially, physically, psychologically, on all those levels, because there's a non-authentic approach to the way that you live. And I think Travis Alexander will have struggled with that hugely, the fact that he wasn't being true to his faith. So part of that sees, I imagine, Jodi Arias recognising the conflict, and secondly, her feeling that there is a way of cementing their relationship. As a side note, it's worth knowing that when Travis Alexander talked about Jodi Arias just after they met, he did tell one of his friends that basically he'd met his future wife. So even though this was very early on, those kind of sentiments, those kind of commitments had been muttered, likely to one another as well as to friends. So this was deep. Soon after Alexander meets Jodi Arias, he actually starts sending missionaries to her home. So the Book of Mormon is one of those books where people are meant to go as missionaries. It's meant to be a real honour to be a missionary. And you can be in the Mormon church and you can volunteer. It's usually 2 years. And during that period of time, you'll maybe get one phone call a week home. You won't be able to be on social media. You will be sent anywhere in the world. So it's a big deal. But it's considered a real honour, a real blessing to the family. So he's sending those missionaries to her home, and those missionaries have one thing that they want to do, which is to present the Book of Mormon and to convert Jodi Arias to becoming a Mormon. That is the job and the duty of the Mormon church. They quoted scriptures to her, and she was really taken with it. So she decides that one of the ways that she can connect with him deeply is to actually convert. So November the 26th, 2006, she gets baptised in the Church of the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that's all about her dedicating herself to being a Mormon so that she can dedicate herself to Travis as well. That would be a big step. And there's this, I find it quite scary photograph of them both in like white, these oversized white clothes when he's basically baptized her. And even though on one level you think, I can see that, I can see people changing their faith. Personally though, I think that when you do that very quickly and it's because you're in a relationship, you're probably not doing it because you have faith, you're doing it because you have a future with the person that you're dedicating yourself to. And that's what she was doing. She was showing an external reflection of an internal desire, which was to be with him full time, to become his wife, ideally. Now, their official relationship only lasted about 5 months. It went on a lot longer than that when it came down to the physical aspects, but let's say 5 months, the official narrative of their relationship. And what scared the friends of Travis quite a lot was that you would imagine that that would be the end of it. You know, they've been living in a very long-term relationship, California and Mesa, total different ends of the country. And yet, after the relationship ends, she moves to Mesa, so where Travis Alexander lives. So that in itself is starting to give us some concern. That is starting to suggest that even though they have apparently ended cordially, that Jodi Arias is not ready for that. And if she can't be in a physical relationship with him, she at least wants to know where he is. That's quite stalker-based, isn't it? The idea that you would completely relocate after a breakdown in a relationship with your ex to where they are. It also seems that the one thing that consistently occurred throughout the time that they knew each other was the sexual encounters. Whilst we'll talk in depth a little later on about what she says she felt they became, certainly when I look into this, I think they were both very physically active. I think they enjoyed quite a lot of role play. I also think they liked a little bit of the sadomasochism, and I think that Jodi Arias was an incredibly willing partner. I don't think there's any shame in wanting what you want in sex. Lots of people have lots of fun in lots of different ways, and it's perfectly acceptable. It's adult play. But the way that she portrays it in court is something that becomes very different to what I feel officially took place. Another thing that Jodi Arias is accused of by Travis is that she's stalking him, and it's not low level. You know, we're not talking about, oh God, She keeps going on my Facebook page and liking my posts. Or she wrote, nice picture the other day on my Insta. We're not talking low level, right? We're talking high level criminal kind of stalking. So if you was dating or seeing another woman, she just basically threatened them, sent emails, which were really nasty. Also, she would slash his tires. That is very, very scary behaviour. She even broke into his house on occasions. I say broke in, okay, the door might have been open, but nonetheless, if you let yourself into a home uninvited, then you are actually breaking into that house. You can't do that. If you are an ex, you're an ex for a reason. Stay away from the home. But she does this, and she does it, I think, quite a lot to try to catch him out in relations with other people. So she's building this obsessiveness, this compulsiveness even, and that behaviour is something that's new to some degree. We haven't seen it really play out in previous relationships, although we can acknowledge that previously her own mother and her friends have said that she gets hysterical and that she needs calming down and collecting when she's in those frenzied states. Hold on to that, because I think that's something that's very relevant to the rest of this case. Now, she doesn't stay in Mesa for that long. She's there for about 8 months. So she's not getting what she wants. She's obviously still having sex with Travis Alexander, but she's not getting that relationship. And so she goes back to live with her grandparents in California. Now, this is what a friend of Travis says. This is verbatim what Lovinger Hughes said. What a name. Is it just me? Lovinger Hughes. It's an incredible name. I didn't even know it existed. If I've pronounced it wrong, I apologise, Lovinger. It could be Lovingia. I don't know. So Hughes reported that Travis said, I'm getting my life back. Like, this is a whole new start. She's gone. Because he felt imprisoned by her constant attention. Now, what his friends didn't know was that in spite of the fact that he was constantly complaining about Jodi Arias being a stalker, they were still constantly communicating. So he's not giving her a clear message. So one of the main reasons why Jodi Arias and Travis broke up is because she was constantly stalking him, and one of the ways that she did that was to break into his Facebook. And on there she found loads of flirty messages. So rightfully so, I think, she called it a day. And he was really happy about that. Obviously, we see that from the communication he had with his friends. He was glad the relationship was over. He felt it was toxic. He felt it was suffocating. And he did feel that Jodi was relatively unstable. So he felt like he was getting a new lease of life. However, when you do that, don't keep having sex with the person that you feel is obsessive about you. Travis Alexander carries on having sex with her, both on a cyber level, on a phone sex level, and they're constantly texting pictures of each other naked. That is not a clear break. It's very confusing for people, and if you don't want to be in a relationship with somebody that you think is becoming an obsessive stalker, it's really important to create those firm boundaries. And in fact, Stephen Alexander, who is Travis's brother, said that Jodi Arias was his brother's kryptonite. So even though it was terrible for him, for whatever reason, he couldn't help but be around her, knowing that it was destructive. And this is a big problem if you have a romantic stalker in your world. Not all romantic stalkers are in relationships with people they think they are. But in this case, we know that there is history, so there has been a romantic relationship between Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander. So this is a problem because she doesn't want to let go and she feels that she has a right to certain territory. They have been in a relationship. He said that she was potentially going to be his wife. So she probably had all these ideas about the future and how that was going to play out. Having that taken away is something that can incite rage. And I genuinely think that she had decided that her life was going to be with him. And even when they broke up, she probably broke up with him to teach him a lesson, as opposed to expecting him to accept it graciously and say, let's move on. And then add to that the fact that he still sleeps with her. So now she knows she's not going to be his wife, but she's good enough to be his whore. P.S. I don't think he was treating her like a whore. I think they were friends with benefits. I'm saying that in her mind, I imagine that's the kind of thinking and feeling that would have been igniting the rage that I think flows out later on in this story. And this sexual relationship continues right up until Travis Alexander's death. In fact, there's a big reason behind his death. And when you look at the text messages, and my God, there were insane amounts of text messages between them. insane. And the thing about that is when you go to court, they're all read out. So just gonna give you a clue, guys, be careful what you write, because believe me, if you have it read out in court by somebody who doesn't like you, such as a prosecution, it can be really damning. In fact, me and my sister constantly laugh about the fact that if people actually read the text messages that we share with each other, we'd probably be put away forever, because we're just really inappropriate with each other and we say things that are really naughty and bad, but obviously it's with an ironic tone. But if somebody read them straight faced, they'd be like, take these two off and lock them away for the life. That's it. And I bet all of you right now can think of some of those conversations that you've had. So imagine a po-faced prosecution reading out your kinkiest of messages or your most aggressive of messages about maybe the boss you don't like and what you'd like to do with them. That's the kind of thing that we do, but these are used in evidence and it's pretty terrifying. And in 2008, in May that year, they're having a major fight and Travis Alexander actually writes, "You don't know what horror you've caused me." And she writes back, "It wasn't really my intention to harm you." He also calls her a sociopath and the lowest of the low. I don't think Travis Alexander is perfect in this relationship. I think it's really easy to always do that, painting this one as pure and this one as evil. It doesn't work that way in crimes of passion. It's not that there's ever an excuse or a reason, and there certainly isn't, for the way that Travis Alexander loses his life. Jodi Arias is absolutely the lowest of the low where that's concerned. He is correct. But we all have a part to play in the way that we treat other human beings. And we should always treat other human beings in our intimate circle with respect. If you are somebody who is having sex with another human being, you should honour them with a certain level of etiquette. It's your duty to, because you're being given that intimate space. I don't think that Travis Alexander treats Jodi Arias fairly as an intimate partner. That's the only crime I think he's guilty of. I don't think he's guilty of any other crimes. But I think on an emotional level, that is something that causes a lot of low blows for Jodi Arias. I also fully understand why he's constantly trying to disconnect from her, but being pulled back because he finds her very sexually alluring, very sexually attractive, and also she is somebody that is willing to reciprocate the kind of sex that he likes. And she's converted to Mormon, and she's willing to, shall we say, have sex in certain ways that he feels won't compromise his religion. One of those ways is anal, because apparently vaginal sex is the problem. And he feels that if they stick to those kind of sexual routines, there is less likelihood for him to be sinning. We all have ways, don't we, in faith, of manipulating a little bit. I think pretty much every religious person, aside from those who just purely devote their lives to God, are a bit like, well, probably shouldn't drink alcohol, but I really like the way I feel when I'm drunk. Or definitely shouldn't have sex before we're married, but it feels really good. A lot of us break rules, right? And you're like, it'll be fine. God's going to be cool. God's going to be like, Jesus danced with prostitutes and drank alcohol and created big feasts. They'll be cool with it. It's like a festival. We all have our ways, don't we? And so Travis Alexander does that with Jodi Arias. And I imagine that to some degree she felt a bit used. But again, as an adult, you have a right to say no. You can't just pin the way that you feel on your partner. You have to take some responsibility and accountability about that and around that. It's very different if you're in a highly domestically abusive relationship, although she'll try to say she was, and you're coercively controlled as well. That's different. You don't have choices then. But Jodi Arias has a lot of choices and chances not to do what she ends up doing. So I don't buy in to the stories that she's going to tell. So by June 2008, this is when Travis Alexander has actually met another woman. He's pursuing a person called Mimi, and he's also imagining that Mimi could be his future Mormon wife. Now, I understand that Jodi Arias would probably be fueled with rage by that because he's already played that one with her. So she was meant to be that person, but she might be taking it literally. So Travis Alexander might be one of those people who falls fast and hard. He's seen Mimi, he thinks that she might be the perfect Mormon material, and then 6 months down the line, he might not. But for Jodi Arias, this is probably a major rejection because she had changed and transitioned and lived her life according to what she thought he wanted sexually, allowed herself to be used in a way that they both enjoyed, but that enabled him to feel that he could still pursue his faith. And now she isn't going to even get to be the wife. He's going to pick another woman over her. So that would undoubtedly pour gasoline on the flames. This is where everything changes, because obviously his friends think that he's going to be turning up in Cancun and he doesn't arrive. So his friends are texting him and saying, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What should we get up to? And there's no response. And this goes on for days. And this starts to really worry his friends, because this is completely unlike Travis. He's a really committed human being. And also, he loves doing what he does. So the fact that he's been missed at this point, he doesn't turn up for a trip to Cancun, Mexico, it's going to instantly create alarm bells. So his friends then connect and say, we need to go and visit his home. And on June the 9th, 2008, that's what they do. They basically get a code through his garage so that they can get into the house. And the call to the emergency services is awful, because you can just feel the absolute shock when they find him lying dead in the shower. And the pictures that I'm going to post are really graphic. So do look away if you cannot stomach this kind of material.
What's going on?
A friend of ours is dead in his bedroom. We hadn't heard from him for a while. We think he's dead. His roommate just went in there and said there's lots of blood. I didn't go in, but I can give you the phone to someone who went in there.
Yes, please, can you?
Hello.
Hi, so what's going on?
He's dead. He's in his bedroom.
Okay.
In the shower.
Okay, how did this happen? Do you have any idea?
No, we have no idea. Everyone's been wondering about him for a few days.
She said that there was blood. So is it coming from his head? Did he cut his head?
It's all over the place.
Is there any weapons around?
No, I don't know. Not that I saw.
How many people are in the house?
How many are in the house right now? Just the 5 of us? 5 of us.
Okay, I need all of you outside.
Okay.
Hold on just a moment. Okay, you're a good friend of Travis's, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has he been depressed at all? Thinking about committing suicide, anything like that?
I don't think he's been thinking he committed suicide. He's been really depressed because he broke up with this girl, and he was all upset about that. But I don't think he would actually kill himself over that.
Has he been threatened by anyone recently?
Yes, he has. Okay. He has an ex-girlfriend that's been bothering him and following him and slashing tires and things like that.
And do you know the ex-girlfriend's name?
Do you remember it? Yeah. What's his ex-girlfriend's name? Ask Taylor.
And do you know if he's ever reported it to the police?
Her name is Jodi. I don't know if he's ever reported. Hold on. Yeah. Ask Taylor if he's ever reported Jodi to the police, like if Travis did. No, he hasn't reported anything about Jodi's behavior.
Okay, and you guys left the roommate. When was the last time he saw Travis? Was it 3 days ago?
Zach. You guys, when was the last time you guys saw Zach? Travis. They want to know about the roommate.
Last time I saw him was, last Thursday or Friday?
The last time I remember seeing him was last Thursday. Okay. When was that Mimi saw him? Mimi saw him last Tuesday, or last Monday. She talked to him last Monday.
Okay. And everyone is out of the house. There's no one else in the house.
No one's in the house.
Okay.
So let me take you through what the injuries were. Probably the one that I visually struggle with most, and I've looked at lots of crime photographs, and I've seen some traumatic bodies as well. So I am somebody with a decent stomach for this kind of material, but seeing his throat cut so deeply, it is basically from ear to ear, and it almost decapitates him. Just imagine the kind of power required to do that. Also, the rage that's elicited in that moment, because there must be. That in itself would have killed him. But then add to that 27 to 29 stab wounds, and they are deep. One goes into his heart. So he's mortally wounded. He doesn't need to be stabbed more than a few times, but the murder is utterly brutal. He's also shot just above his right eye, and they believe that that happened after he'd been stabbed and had his throat cut. So this is overkill beyond belief. And we use that term, don't we, overkill, but we use it for a purpose, because overkill tends to show a blitz killing, i.e. somebody who's just gone absolutely crazy in that moment, or it tends to be something like a crime of passion, where the anger and aggression towards that person, because that person has built up this resentment, is so overwhelming that it just spills out and just means that you want to obliterate that individual. You want to take out every last remnant of pain that you may feel is attributed to them and do it to a point where you are exhausted, relieved, and fulfilled. That tends to be the reasoning behind those kind of murders. I'm not saying that panic doesn't set in after that. I'm saying that in those moments, that's what you're attaining. You're attaining that sense of fulfillment. You'll never do this to me again. I'm going to end you. And that's probably the most terrifying kind of mindset that we can see in crimes. The murder scene was not an organised murder scene. So when we look at people who know what they're doing when it comes down to killing, this scene absolutely didn't demonstrate that. There was a bloody handprint, very nice amount of forensic information there, you know, handprint on the wall. There was hair that belonged, ironically, to Jodi Arias. So we've now got hair, and it's not like it was just like there because she'd been in the shower. It was at the scene of the crime, covered in blood, showing that she had to be there. The bloody handprint could not have been there unless she had been present. So it's obvious that this forensic scene hasn't been dealt with effectively. She has tried to clean up a little bit, but she's done it very, very badly. Probably the biggest error that she made, however, was the digital camera that she put in the washing machine. So she actually put it through the washing machine. She had deleted certain photographs from it before she did that, but then she probably thought to herself, you know what, just put it on 30 and see how it goes. But problematically for her, the memory card didn't get corrupted. So not only has she got a bloody handprint, her own hair, she also has pictures of herself with times and dates. So lots of pictures of herself naked and with him naked, demonstrating they've been intimate together that day, but also a couple that she didn't realise she'd taken while she's killing him. I mean, if you're going to mess up a crime, Jodi Arias, this is the way to do it, girl. So the forensics instantly are just having a field day where the evidence is concerned. I mean, she may as well have just written a name and signature in blood on the wall, saved us all a hassle. But that isn't the way she works. No. She is not the kind of person who's going to go down lightly. She is not the kind of person who's going to go guilty in any way, shape or form when it comes down to the idea of first-degree premeditated murder. That's not the typology of this woman's personality whatsoever. What I find absolutely compelling is that when the phone call is made to emergency services, the woman, aside from ascertaining that Travis Alexander is definitely dead, obviously she has to make sure that he is dead, and when that's confirmed, she automatically starts saying, is there anybody that could have wanted him harmed? And instantly, the friend says, yeah, Jodi Arias, it's his ex-girlfriend. So straight away, the police have been given this name, and the detectives are automatically drawn towards her. And this is where, in my opinion, the case takes a completely unusual turn, because I have watched a lot of interrogations and I've watched a lot of court cases, but Jodi Arias is one of those unique individuals that you actually have to watch again and again, because you cannot quite believe that this is playing out in reality. The performance that she puts on is spellbinding, I'll be honest, mostly because you cannot believe for 1 minute that she ever thinks that she's going to get away with it. But undoubtedly, there is a part of her that believes that she can outsmart pretty much everyone, including very well-versed, educated, and absolutely experienced detectives who from the get-go know that they have the murderer of Travis Alexander. So let's start from the very beginning. First of all, there's a phone call. She gets called by the police and they obviously want to say like, Jodi, have you been anywhere near Mesa? Because, you know, your ex has just turned up horrifically and brutally murdered. And everyone thinks that you're a little bit unhinged and have been stalking him. And she's like, no, nothing to do with it. Not been there for ages. Not been there for ages. Saw him in like April 2008 and basically that was the last time. And they're like, okay, it's just, we found your handprint and also some pictures of you during the murder. Want to say anything about that? And she's like, are you sure that's me? It's like, well, the camera seems to suggest it is. And she's like, are you really sure? That's literally the way that she is. Can you imagine that? Well, the thing is, Jodi, we have got some time, date stamped pictures of you on the day of the murder, and then it's your foot in the picture, and then we've got your handprint on the wall. And she's like, that could just be someone who looks like me. No, Jodi, it's most definitely you. But that's what we start to see throughout this situation. It's all about how, now they have this information, do I wrap this up in a way where I can make myself look less implicated? And wow, does she go for it. So the first interview that she has, she basically is just talking a huge amount of waffle. She's denying ever being in the vicinity. She's saying things like, if I would have murdered him, but then obviously suggesting that she didn't. She's saying how, you know, she really wants to help. She's very, very clear about the fact that she hasn't seen him at all. She also talks about the relationship that she had, and, you know, she's very sickly sweet about him. Very sickly sweet about him, you know. He's just this amazing human being. She can't imagine how difficult this must be for his family. And it's really strange to watch because it's somebody trying to seem like a good, gracious, nice human being. It's not the way that we act. Bear in mind, she's meant to be this obsessive, in-love woman who has been distraught by the breakup of the relationship that she's had with Travis Alexander, and also that she's still having a sexual relationship with. What would you be like? First of all, you'd be completely in shock if some copper had brought you in off the street and said, we're going to nail you for this crime. You'd be beside yourself. You'd be like, why am I even here? I'm a completely innocent party. Secondly, you might be a bit angry. You'd be like, how dare you accuse me of doing this? But most importantly, you'd be distraught. The love of your life has been horrifically slaughtered. You're going to be in pieces, absolutely in pieces. That's the key. The authenticity of somebody who truly loves and truly cares for somebody, their feelings are with that human. They are going to be constantly fixated on what's happened, how it's happened, why it's happened, who's done it. And they're going to be really, really pissed that you're accusing them potentially of being a party to that crime. That's what a normal, well-adjusted human being is like. They can't hold those feelings in. It's so authentic. And the police know that. If I'm just sat really quietly spoken, willing to just talk to you about whatever, go off into some bizarre rambles about things that are completely irrelevant to the case, that in itself is deflection. I'm not interested. I'm going to let you do it, because the more you do it, the more you're going to trip yourself up. It's very simple. And secondly, I'm going to let you run into corners where you can't get out of them, because that's what interviewers do when they interrogate you. They're looking for you to back yourself into a corner. So he withholds quite a lot of information in that first interview. He goes out of the room. And you know what she does? It's like watching Shayna Hubers. If you haven't seen that, go and watch that on my timeline. It's like watching her again. She sings a Dido song, not being awful, but that's not even a great choice of song to sing. She does some yoga, because that's what you're going to want to do in it. Just like show you flexibility. I'm in an interrogation where my ex-partner has been brutally slaughtered. So what I think I'll do is I'll just do a headstand. Just do a headstand. It's completely rational. I'll do some back crabs over my chair. That in itself just stings of somebody trying to act innocent.
You should have at least done your makeup, Jodi. Gosh. change my memory, and I won't go, and I can't breathe until you're resting here with me, and I won't go, and I can't hide, and I won't leave. Breathe until you're resting here with me. The stars are brightly shining. This is the day of our dear Savior's birth.
Here's your shoes. Why don't you go ahead and put those on?
There is nothing worse than watching somebody try to act innocent, because you can't. The guilt is there. And so because the guilt is there, you don't have the reactions that are just so instinctual. That's the thing about human behaviour. We aren't measured in moments of panic and fear and loss and grief. We just have this response emotionally. Yes, some people will be very quiet, they'll be incapable of speaking, or some people will be hysterical, or some people will just be in shock. But there is always an instinctual reaction, and you can feel it in your gut. You don't do yoga, stand on your head and sing a Dido song that very few of us recognise, if I'm completely honest. That's what she does. So they're watching this all the time. And they actually confront her with the fact that they've got the pictures. Again, she just completely denies it, blindsides it, and sticks to that for a while. They also bring a female interrogator in who basically really plays bad cop with her, worth watching. She just doesn't care. She's like, I'm going to be a bad cop. And the reason that she does that is because the initial interrogator, who she hasn't necessarily got a great rapport with, but he hasn't treated her in that intensely negative way, which is basically the way that the second interrogator does. The woman comes in, sits with her, and is basically saying, you know, you can't shake my tail. I know you've done it, admit it. But if you don't like working with me, I can bring in the guy you spoke to before. She does that about 3 or 4 times. And that's because she wants to make the interrogator that she spoke to before the ally. She wants him back in so that there's a rapport built and there's a bigger chance of her starting to confess that she's actually been involved in the crime. And from the get-go, the police officers are saying, we know you did it. This isn't about you getting away with murder. We know you did it. However, why did you do it? Because that definitively expresses and decides whether you might get the death sentence, a full life tariff, or of course, something like manslaughter or self-defense. So the issue isn't that she's killed him. We know that. She knows that. It's why. Because that is going to really be definitive in how this case plays out. In those first interviews, she's just like, I didn't do it. I'd never do it. I don't even know who that is. Why is that? Can I see the pictures? She's really, really desperate to see the pictures. And you can imagine why. Because she's trying to figure out, oh, now they know it's me. Now my alibi that I've created hasn't worked. How am I going to get away with this? And bear in mind, when she's left the scene of the crime, she's driven a long way and then called him on her mobile to act like she is going to see him at some point. And she even says that she's inviting him to come and see Othello with her and a friend. Othello. I mean, what a one to go for. Sorry, if you don't know Othello by Shakespeare, look it up. It ends in the bad death of a partner. That's all I'm saying. So you kind of think to yourself, what is that unconscious and subconscious of Jodi Arias doing in that moment to even bring in Othello? It's unreal. So we now have a situation where the police are very much playing cat and mouse. You know, they know that they're going to catch her. They just don't quite know how at this moment in time. So then she's obviously taken back to the county jail because she's got to spend the night there. They're not going to let her be released because they know that she's killed somebody. When she comes back to be interviewed, she's obviously had time to think. She's obviously thought to herself, you know what? It's not going down well for me. Because by now, the police have also been in touch with people who know her. They know that she had 2 canisters that she'd filled with petrol so that she could travel a very long distance without going to petrol stations. Why would you want to do that unless you didn't want to be spotted? That's the key, isn't it? She doesn't want to be on CCTV filling up her petrol tank near where Travis Alexander lives. So she plans it. And you know who she gets to do that? Yeah, that's right. Her original boyfriend, Daryl Brewer. Told you he was going to be involved in the testimony because he has to stand there and be like, I did think it was a bit strange, but I was quite happy to oblige. So now she's got to the point where she's realised that the police are definitely onto her. You know, at the end of the day, they get that she has been at Travis Alexander's home on the night of the murder and she's implicated. How does she figure out a way forward to get through this? So she comes up with this claim. She says that 2 ninjas, basically, they're all dressed in black, they've got masks on and everything, but she thinks one is a male and one is a female because of the sizes, break in to Travis Alexander's home, brutally slaughter him, and then don't kill her. And they're actually having an argument, should we kill her? And for some reason, they don't kill her. But just like any hit criminal would, they swear her to secrecy. They get her license, they look at it and they're like, right, we've got your address. Got your address now. So if you tell anyone who we are, even though you don't know, because you can't see us because we're wearing masks and we're all in black, we are going to come for you and we're going to kill all your family because we've got that address. That's what's going to happen. And so she's like, okay, I won't tell anyone. And then she just goes, right, I'll just leave the scene of the crime. I'll just put the digital camera in the washing machine, just get in the car. I'll just drive a long way and arrive at my new boyfriend's, Ryan Burns, but I'll arrive 24 hours late. And I won't say anything about what's happened because that's completely rational behaviour. That's what we do if we'd just been violently attacked and watched our ex be literally cut into pieces. But that's the story. I mean, I do imagine that the police officers at that point and detectives were like, this is not what we expected. Like, I mean, okay, this is a stretch, isn't it? Even in their understanding of this case. She's gone from saying that she was nowhere near the scene of the crime to the fact that no, she was at the scene of the crime, but she's got involved in some kind of weird ninja hit where she's now sworn to secrecy and she cannot tell anyone. But now she has. So that blows that up, doesn't it? Because immediately, if she's that concerned about not telling the police because she feels like her family is going to get horribly murdered, she's just told the police. So she's just defied the reality of her whole belief system. And instantly, that's not a credible scenario to express, is it? She's denied her own belief system, but she goes for it. Knock yourself out, Jodi. Literally, everyone's just like, we did not see this coming. And they just rip it to pieces straight away. They rip it to pieces straight away. And she again has time to think about this. And by the actual time that the trial begins, she's got her story straight. She has decided that Travis Alexander is a brutal domestic abuser and that she is essentially somebody suffering from battered woman syndrome. So she is somebody who is a domestic violence survivor. She is not a murderer. Remember, that's really important. First of all, she's saying that she's not guilty. If you're not guilty, you have to fight for that, don't you? And that means that the family are going to have to sit and listen to the brutality of what happened to their family member. They're going to have to watch as the defence rips their family member to pieces, because that's their job. Their job is to make the person who is the victim seem like the perpetrator. It's agonising for anybody who knows and loves someone who's seen them at their best and their worst, but who truly understands that they are not a monster being made out to seem like the devil. And Jodi Arias fully knows that's going to happen, but she really isn't that interested in Travis Alexander or his family. These faux suggestions of concern that she makes in her interrogation are just about herself. It's always about making Jodi look better. It's also worth noting that right from the get-go, Travis Alexander's friends did not like her at all. In fact, David Hughes, who's a really good friend of Travis Alexander, wouldn't even let her in his home. That's how concerned they were about her behaviour. She would not like him talking pretty much to anyone. So this isn't just about a jealous woman who doesn't like the idea of her partner going off and having conversations with other girls. This is about him talking to anyone. She didn't like him having any friendships. She wanted the intensity. She wanted the relationship to be with him and her and no one else. In fact, it got to the point where all his friends just didn't want to have any contact with her at all. And there was one point where David remembers his wife and his sister-in-law and himself sitting with Travis and trying to get him to break up with her. And what they didn't know was basically she was at the house. She was actually at his house and she was just upstairs, but she was listening to it all. And when she walked in, David said that she basically looked like she could kill them all. He said he'd never seen a look on somebody's face like that. So this shows how concerned friends were. In fact, one of the friends said that he thought that she might end up killing him. So these were jokey conversations that were actually based in real concern. And not just real concern, they were actually predicting the future. Another note is that lots of his friends said that even though she was completely into Travis, he wasn't quite into her in the same way. And it felt like codependency was occurring, that she was starting to get more and more reliant on the relationship with him and deriving what she needed from him in that way to feel valid and valued, and that concerned them. An extract from Jodi Arias's diary actually says that she loved him so fully and completely. He was her everything. And she stalked him on every single social media platform. She went to his home, got through the back door when he was getting intimate with another woman, spied on him, slashed his tyres, broke into his email account, hacked his Facebook account, broke into his home, stole his journals, and she read his diary. So she is not the ideal partner, and she is showing some high-level romantic stalker capabilities. So we are in dangerous territory for Travis, because he may not be looking at her with the same kind of potential that she has, but I think that he would understand at this point that he really is in a relationship that's red hot and dangerous. And it is, because that is completely outside the realms of typical behaviours in relationships. When you're in a relationship with somebody exhibiting those kind of patterns, you really need to take stock, because it's a dangerous place to be. You are heading for disaster, because the reason that they are gathering that information on you is to feed the way that they feel. It's to feed the justification for those feelings. So if they're starting to harbour resentment and rage towards you, they are the things that start to feed that resentment and rage. On the day that Travis Alexander dies, that's 4th of June 2008, she just arrives in the early hours. He's online at the time, but they do end up just going to sleep. So they just fall asleep together. But when they wake up, they get very physical. Their sex is incredibly fiery. Often from the testimony, we know that it involves photographing each other, and they have a really sex-fueled afternoon on a Monday. So they're obviously very much enjoying one another's bodies. But remember, he's at a point where he's moving on, and she knows that. And this use of seduction to allure victims is something that is used quite commonly with women. And I think that Jodi Arias has gone there with the full intention to show him what he could have had before ending what he would have had. And that's really powerful, isn't it? Showing him what he could have had and ending what he would have had, i.e. that future with his potential Mormon wife that he thought was going to work out. As I've said, Travis Alexander was shot as well. So he had a shot wound above his right eye. That was from a .25 caliber gun. Now, this is interesting. He had never owned a gun. So Jodi Arias, during testimony, tries to suggest that it's his gun. But bizarrely and strangely, just a week earlier, her grandparents have a burglary that the police think might be a bit staged. And guess what goes missing? 25 caliber gun. What a surprise. And then suddenly Jodi Arias finds one in Travis's cupboard. That's how the story goes. So again, when I'm saying this because the jury in this case have a very clear decision to make. Was this premeditated murder? Because remember, Jodi Arias is going to play that it is self-defense. So what we know from the memory card, because obviously there were a few pictures that were taken that she didn't know had been taken. At 5:30 p.m, she takes the last picture of him alive. And then they believe that she asked him to sit down or to get down in a pose. She's quite petite. So remember, he's quite a burly guy. If he stood up and she goes for him, the likelihood is he's going to be able to overpower her. But if he's down in a position, she's going to have the upper hand. So at that point, she's got a kind of advantage. At that point, it's likely that's when she slices his neck. She then turns him around, drags him down the hall at about 5:32 p.m. The camera shows a foot over his body, dragging him back to the shower. And obviously we see that she stabs him repeatedly. Imagine that. And imagine then, when that evidence has been presented, suggesting, are you sure the pictures are of me? I mean, version 1 interrogation, that is a classic. Are you sure the picture of me isn't me? Sure all those naked pictures of me isn't me? Could it not be somebody else who looks just like me? Could it be a clone of me? Jodi Arias from day dot is somebody who courts public attention. So after she's told the detectives that actually what's happened is these intruders have come in, they have killed Travis and let her live, she goes on a TV show called Inside Edition and she talks about what happened in the attack. And she says to them, you know what? I predict fully that I'm going to be found innocent because I know that I didn't do it. It's as simple as that. So I can 100% guarantee that I didn't kill him and that I will be exonerated from guilt. So in spite of the fact that she appears on that TV show, she has to change her story because she goes for self-defense. Under oath, she says, yes, I did kill him, but no, it wasn't murder. It wasn't premeditated. I'm pleading not guilty because basically I had 2 minutes to decide whether I wanted to live or die. So she blames Travis. Simple as that. She says, he's an abusive partner. I had no other option. Now, self-defense may seem like a plea that somebody can do when they have killed somebody and, like we say, there's been an abusive situation. But it doesn't work that way. So the rule of self-defense has to be balanced. There has to be an equal level of defense. So if you stab me and then I stab you a couple of times more and you die, that is an equal defense. You have come for me, I have retaliated, and I have killed you. And at that point, I'm going to call the police and we're going to deal with that situation. Even if I run away, I'm still going to evidence that I've been harmed, you've been harmed, and the truth is that I got the better of you. But argument-wise, I'd probably be able to suggest that there was an equal balance, that I was defending myself. If you present a person who has been stabbed horrifically, had their throat cut, been shot, the level of defense that you would need to show was that you would be absolutely black and blue, probably almost dead, definitely likely to have been stabbed. And if you just managed by chance to have got the better of your attacker, the truth is that in that consequence, you may get away with self-defense. You would have to have an equal almost level of injury. That's ideally what they look for. You're going to have to appear very injured. Now, Jodi Arias does have some scratches. She says the cat scratches, they may well have been, because I imagine slicing his throat open, he wouldn't have been up to defend himself anyway. But if you haven't got any obvious injuries, it's clear within days after this person's been murdered that it wasn't a fair self-defense. You know, if you almost decapitated them, blew the brains out, stabbed them relentlessly, and then didn't call the police, your self-defense plead isn't going to hold up. Now, what I dislike most about people who use battered wife syndrome or battered woman syndrome is when they use it knowing that they are completely guilty of what they have done, but that they want to use this as an opportunity to get themselves off, because it really does stop women who have been in horrible situations and men who've been in horrible situations being taken seriously. If people use this kind of defense when they're not entitled to it, it lessens those of us trying our best to make it so that people who go through these horrible situations are given the justice that they deserve. But that's what they do. And they do it in a way that means that Travis Alexander's family have to hear some of the most grotesque things about him that they could ever have had a nightmare of hearing. Remember, he's a Mormon. They don't want to hear about his sex life. But because he's a Mormon and because he's got this conflict and he's having sex, obviously they're going to bring him out to be a liar. Well, he's pretending to be a good Mormon, but he's lying. He's having sex. He's going against his own religion. What kind of a person does that? Remember that also, this is probably a point of emotional blackmail where Jodi Arias is concerned, because she knows that they've had sex. She's got pictures of him. So essentially, the emotional blackmail could have occurred as well, because they have a really great sex life, but he knows he's not going to have it. And there's a drama made of this case called Dirty Little Secret, because that's what they try to say she is, and they try to ruin him and his character. In fact, they play calls. Now again, come back to sex now. People have lots of sex play. We can say filthy things to each other. That does not make us violent sadists. We can have lots of adult play where we have slight BDSM. Or if you're into sadomasochism, as long as there's two consenting adults, that's completely acceptable. Whatever you want to titillate yourselves, as long as you are both saying yes, is fine. But in the cold light of day, when you're not in the moment, and these kind of tapes are played to a courtroom, obviously that can make you seem a very different human being to the one that you really are. We can be sexually liberal 1% of the time and a true faithful human being to our religion 99% of the time. But if all I do is play that 1% of the time to a group of strangers, that could influence them really heavily against your character. And that's what they do. And there's this particular one where he says that when she orgasms, when they're having phone sex, she sounds like a 12-year-old girl having an orgasm. They start bringing in this idea that not only is he a sexual deviant, a partner beater, he's also got child molestation interest. He's also into paedophilia. So if you could ever completely destroy the memory of somebody, I mean, that is a trio, isn't it? He's a paedophile, he's a sexual sadist, he's a partner beater, and let's throw in as well, he goes against his own faith, so he's a hypocrite. All playing out in court. She said that all of the rage that she had from the past, her experiences with Travis, all came to this moment where she lost it. All this rage, this pent-up anger that he'd made her feel humiliated, abused, ashamed sexually. He'd rejected, abandoned her. He'd made her feel less than. All of this bubbled up in the moment. But also that it connected with the abuse that she had from her father, who used a belt on her at age 7, who got rougher and rougher with her when she was a teenager. It also collided with the way her mother, who was accused of carrying a wooden spoon in a purse, abused her with it. Believe me, the look of a mum's face in court is worth £1 million. It's just disbelief and disdain. But Jodi Arias is just willing to throw anyone under the bus, including her own parents, as long as it gets her off, as long as it convinces people that she is the victim. She accuses him constantly of physical abuse. She says that when she converts to Mormonism, and there's a picture of them in white, and they're all dressed up, and there's this new beginning, and she feels hopeful, she feels like they've got a future together, and they get back to where she's staying, and he starts kissing her, and then he spins around, bends her over the bed, and she thinks he's going to carry on kissing her, but instead he has anal sex with her. And then he leaves. And she's asked about how that makes her feel, and she said, I felt like I used a piece of toilet paper and cried. Do I believe that? No, I don't. Does that mean that Travis Alexander treated her brilliantly in that situation? Probably not. Who knows? But certainly she was a willing participant. All you need to do is read the text messages and listen to the testimony of the prosecution to realise that she was very much engaged in those sexual connections. She was very much a driver in them. But imagine how his family felt. Imagine how they would have had to associate themselves with this human being that they had loved and known being decimated in a court of law. The defence even reads a text and it says, "Rejoice in being a whore, that sole purpose in life is to be mine, to have animalistic sex with, and to please me in any way I desire. I will rejoice in you, Jodi." That shows that even though they were having a particular debaucherous type of relationship, it was equal. I will rejoice in you. So in those moments when you're having those hot conversations with your other half, you do allow yourself to express yourself in however many ways you want to. That's what being free is. And she certainly is a willing participant in that. The problem that I have is that the way it's expressed is to try to reduce his reputation, all in favour of getting off somebody who is undoubtedly a murderer. The fact that she also tries to suggest that she walks in, anecdotally, there's no evidence of this, she walks in when he's masturbating, feels a little bit awkward about it, and she walks past him. One of the papers that he's masturbating over, because it's 1980 and that's what you use paper, you wouldn't just be online, would you? But never mind, Jodi never really makes a lot of sense. She says that she sees a picture of him masturbating over a little boy. No evidence of that at all. Yes, we've got that weird comment about the orgasming like a 12-year-old girl, and I agree, that makes me feel anxious, that makes me feel uncomfortable. That doesn't make him a paedophile, that description. He also makes her dress up apparently in pigtails like a schoolgirl. Again, there are whole discos that are dedicated to people going dressed as schoolgirls and schoolboys. It's one of those things. People have a predilection, not over having sex with a young person, but just the outfit itself. Most of the time, because we relate to it as teenagers, it's when we've got our burgeoning sexuality, and therefore we relate to it in a quite sexual way. But there is no evidence at all that he was a molester of any way, shape or form. So it's important, because I don't think you can be more disrespectful than trying to say that somebody's a child molester. And also, Jodi, just going to ask you this, because let me tell you, sweetheart, if I walked in and my other half was looking at child porn, I would have him kicked out on the street and I'd be on the phone to the police quicker than he could say shit. Honestly, that's what would happen. I wouldn't, as you say, stay with him so that he didn't carry out his predilections elsewhere. That's your excuse? That instead of just ratting him out to the police, which is what you would want to do because you wanted to protect children. Remember, you're a Mormon, you're religious, that's what you do. No, you just stay with him so that he doesn't go and harm children. I mean, flimsy is not the word. But the fact that you come up with these things is mind-boggling, because everybody in the room can see that it's absolute tosh. One of the things that she brings up is the fact that she wears clothes that says Travis's property on it. And she does. She's wearing them. Yeah, he's creating them for her. Or maybe she got them, I don't know. But the point is, they are fun games that they clearly have. I do feel there was a little bit of sadomasochism in their relationship, but she seems a very willing participant. And I come back to that. I feel like the defense goes out of their way to make Travis sound like a monster, but I don't think they were prepared for the prosecution, because the prosecution was just aggressive beyond measure. It's worth watching the prosecution. He has no compassion for Jodi Arias, and I don't really feel that defense had that much competition at all. They were going for the death penalty, don't get me wrong. The prosecution wanted her dead. They wanted to show the way that she'd planned and premeditated the murder meticulously. So this premeditation is obvious, isn't it? She's gone there with an intention, with that .25 caliber gun, likely. She has got him in a situation, she's overpowered him, murdered him, gone off, created an alibi, but completely screwed up because she didn't realise she'd dropped the camera. She's been very disorganised in the killing. She's got a handprint on the wall. And then she starts to try to create, well, how did that happen? So this is what Jodi Arias says happened on that fateful night. She said that they're taking pictures of each other sexually and she drops his camera. But that's because he's calling her a stupid idiot and suggesting that a 5-year-old could hold the camera better than her. He body slams her and then she kind of gets knocked over. She runs down the hallway. She then hides in the closet, grabs a gun, conveniently, 25 caliber, just like the one that was taken from her granddad's, and grabs that, runs back into the bathroom, points it at Travis and says, stop. But he just goes for her. So at that point, she shoots him by mistake. Literally never had any evidence of him owning a gun. But that's how it played out. But what about the knife wounds? I mean, nearly 30 knife wounds, including his throat being cut. Okay, you can see somebody in a scuffle, a gun goes off that shouldn't go off and somebody dies. It's terrible, it's rare, it happens, we accept that. But at the point where somebody's neck has been cut to the point where they've almost been decapitated, and when they've been stabbed relentlessly nearly 30 times, how does she explain it? Well, she explains it like this. Yeah, I don't remember any of that. Yeah. Bit of a fog, really. Remember dropping the knife, but it's kind of where it goes blank. I mean, convenient that, isn't it? I mean, Jodi Arias can remember a lot of stuff. It's staggering to know the kind of stuff that she remembers. Minute detail of so many other things, but the stabbing of her ex 29 times, can't remember a thing. Foggy, she says to the psychologist. Now, the defense psychologist said this fog was due to Travis attacking her and it causing her to be so anxious that she basically lost her memory. So Dr. Richard Samuel says it appears as if she has dissociative amnesia. It's interesting, isn't it, how language can tell a story? It appears as if. That sounds a lot like, this is what she's trying to make it look like. So the more intense the trauma, the worse the memory. Kind of fits perfectly for her. I don't have to remember anything. I can just say, it's this. I'm so traumatized that this is why I've got this brain fog. And actually another expert's called Alice Laviolette. She's a domestic violence expert and she testifies that she feels that Jodi was a victim of battered woman syndrome. But with respect, the prosecution tore them to pieces. I mean, he just didn't care. It's one of those things you watch and you're like, I'm scared and I'm not even in the courtroom. He basically said that Dr. Richard Samuels had the hots for Jodi. Yeah, basically said there was like an inappropriate relationship going on. And in his final testimony, all he does is just show that she's a liar. He's terrifying to watch. And what blows my mind about this court case as well is that in Arizona, the jury have a chance to ask questions as well. So they're able to say, how were you so calm during the television interviews? What's your understanding of the word skank? Were you mad at Travis when you were stabbing him? Why did you decide to tell the truth 2 years after the killing? All of these things are asked. And spoiler, she can't answer that question that I've just said because this is just a fabric of lies. And Martinez, the prosecution lawyer, also brings in clinical psychologist Janine DeMartin. She did a 12-hour clinical interview. She found that as far as she was concerned, Jodi Arias had BPD, a sense of immaturity, unstable sense of identity, and was an individual who was a mass manipulator. The defence then came and tried to rubbish her by getting another expert to say she wasn't qualified to give that assessment. It was just some kind of bizarre circus. But what the prosecution had to show, and I think what they did really well, was they showed there was a level of premeditation. And he does an amazing job. He basically annihilates her. He calls her a manipulative liar who wants to play the victim, says that she premeditated the murder, tells the jury that she even wants to manipulate them. And there isn't really anywhere for her to go. She constantly refutes questions. He'll get her into a situation where she has to answer, and she just won't want to answer, even though there are things that will back up what she said. She just wants to resist answering anything to him. She just doesn't like him, and it shows. She knows that he's got her on the racks. And because of that, she can't help but show her disdain for him, which goes completely against her. Remember, she's trying to be this battered woman syndrome. She's got to show that she's vulnerable, and she doesn't seem vulnerable. She seems incredibly manipulative and quite confident. So with that in mind, with that need for an emotional way of connecting with the jury, this is how her defence sums up. He says, you don't have to like Jodi Arias, and that 9 days out of 10, I don't like her. She actually laughs at this point. But just think about it. Think about what that means. He's actually saying to the jury, yeah, I don't really like my client either. She's really annoying, like 90% of the time, but, doesn't make her a murderer, does it? So you can see how her character has played out to the point where he's had to sum up in a way where he's trying to get the jury to go, oh, yeah, we don't really like her, but does that make her a killer? Does that make her a premeditated killer? And the fact that she laughs, I wouldn't be laughing. I would be absolutely horrified that my defense is basically assassinating my character when they're meant to be emotionally engaging with the jury to stop them putting me to death or putting me to prison for the rest of my life. So what I believe is I think the defense knew pretty much from day one that they were going to get a guilty verdict. They just want to make sure that she doesn't get put to death. So they've built a case around the fact that he lunged at her from the shower, he held her down, it triggered a time that he choked her unconscious previously. This triggered terrible memories about her childhood, and there was all of this triggering, and suddenly she responded and reacted, which is amazing because it seems to me that Jodi Arias has got the most incredibly convenient memory ever. When she requires it for her victim status, where they suggest that she's in reasonable fear for her life, she's able to recount everything. But when she has to explain the brutal overkill, she's forgotten everything. She's got no memory of it at all. But they do need to try to make a case to say that this isn't necessarily first-degree premeditated murder. So they want them to explore whether it could be second-degree or even self-defense. It takes them 15 hours. She gets first-degree murder guilty. Every single one of them unanimously said it was premeditated and she planned it. That she went to Travis Alexander's home to execute him. And when that guilty verdict is read out, the relief in the courtroom is palpable. Even though Jodi is relatively calm when she's given the verdict, she takes this really sharp intake of breath. This is a girl that's used to getting her own way. And even though I think she definitely knew that she was going to get guilty, I still think it blindsided her when it became a reality. We can be prepared. We never know what it's really going to feel like until it occurs. Within 2 minutes of being found guilty, potentially facing the death penalty, she's just doing an interview with a local TV show. It's just what you'd normally do, isn't it? Just been found guilty. Horrific murder. First thing I'm going to think about is going on TV, just being like, just going to give you an interview calmly. And that's what she does. She's obviously in some mood for some press. She says that it was unexpected because she didn't premeditate the murder. And even though she'd been convicted of first-degree murder, she wants people to be aware that she actually wants the death penalty. She says, death is ultimate freedom. She knows she doesn't deserve to get this sentence, but the idea of being sentenced to life in prison is just something that she feels that she doesn't deserve. So when she's put to death by the state, it will be the ultimate freedom because obviously she'll go straight to heaven because that's what murderous, manipulative people do. They go straight to heaven. So this point, she wants the death penalty, she's asking for it, but that changes quite quickly. Narcissists don't like to die, usually. They like to make things work for them. So even though at that point on TV, she's saying, please put me to death, by the time it gets to her sentencing, she wants a life sentence and she's actually begging for her life, essentially. She's saying, I've done lots of charity work, I've got these t-shirts that I've made with Survivor written on them, which I find incredibly distasteful. And she's very much taken on this idea that she is a battered woman who is the victim of domestic abuse and she acted in self-defense. She's wearing that particular belief system. And she does actually get a full life tariff. So she's never going to get out, but the consequence is that she doesn't have her life taken. She hasn't been quiet either. No, Jodi Arias doesn't want to go away. She's been very busy appealing a conviction, and there's been some changes in the players. So the lawyer for the prosecution, Martinez, was disbarred. I mean, his behaviour is aggressive in court. So I can see that it'd be a bit of a slippery character to work with. But in July 2020, he apparently had leaked information to a member of the media that he was having an affair with, and he also communicated with the dismissed juror and at the same time was engaged in sexual misconduct. So he was disbarred, not allowed to practice anymore. And then Jodi Arias also filed a suit against her own lawyer, Kirk Nurmi. So in 2015, he wrote a book about the case called Trapped with Miss Arias. Can you imagine that? Trapped with Miss Arias. You can imagine what he's trapped. Please let me get out. Why did I get the case? So she wasn't happy with that at all because this is a tell-all book. And she said that as far as she was concerned, he had broken and breached the ethical rules of being a lawyer. Now he decided to defend himself initially, but then he quit the law himself. So he disbarred himself. He said he didn't want her to have control over his life. In fact, he said that Jodi Arias had a pattern of attacking men who she believes have wronged her. In 2016, she's interviewed by Radar Online, where she basically says she's having a great time in prison. She said, even though she's meant to be some hated type of femme fatale, the truth is she got so much public love, it was overwhelming. And if she's meant to be hated, well, it's not working, because all she receives is love. Oh, the narcissism in that is just overwhelming, isn't it? But you can just see her personality type. She's also not very well liked, according to fellow inmates who refer to her, these are her inmates who've been released, as a sociopath. And they say that she uses her feminine charm, shall we say, with guards to get some special privileges. In prison, she's known for making art and selling it too. A lot of things in prison are obviously sold to bring in money to prison. She's also had her hair cut off several times to donate to charity. So she does all these things, but it's very much, I think, to ingratiate herself with public perception. I think Jodi Arias thinks she's going to get out at some point. She also nearly got married in 2019 to a guy called Benjamin Ernst. Benjamin, Tinder, seriously, far, far better opportunity of meeting people, particularly people who don't murder their partners. Just throwing out a bit of dating advice for you there, Benj. Higher bars, higher standards. Just thinking higher bars then. She's behind bars. Sorry, that's a terrible joke. Also, psychiatrists and psychologists who haven't assessed her, so these aren't people that have assessed her, they're just making their own assumptions from watching her. They've said that she's a pathological liar, a narcissist, a sociopath, and potentially has BPD and bipolar disorder. Again, want to acknowledge that BPD and bipolar disorder certainly do not make you murderers at all, but obviously can exacerbate difficult emotions. And if you do have narcissism and sociopathy, then obviously that's going to additionalise those concerns. She's now 39 years of age. She was 26 when she was convicted. Travis Alexander was 29 when he died. And there is something grating, isn't there, about the fact that Jodi Arias is somebody who is doing art in prison, feeling love from lots of people who support her, and living her life fully, albeit behind bars. When Travis Alexander was brutally murdered at the hands of somebody who once professed to love him. Crimes of passion are terrifying, aren't they? But what's mostly terrifying about the case of Jodi Arias is that it is rare to see somebody who is such a pathological liar recorded lying for such long periods of time. And also to watch somebody go from being an independent individual who was known to be a reasonable human being to becoming a convicted felon of murder in first degree of somebody that she was meant to want to protect. I hope she does spend the rest of her life in prison. I hope she never gets out. I think that she's a mass manipulator. You only have to ask yourself that when she first went in, she said that she had nothing to do with the crime. Then it turned out she was attacked by two people who swore her to secrecy. And then finally that she had murdered Travis Alexander, but she'd done it because he was basically an abusive bastard who was trying to kill her. I mean, somebody who will throw everyone, including her own parents, under the bus to try to save her own character and her own freedom, that's not a person you want walking the streets. Fortunately, in the States, you tend to be pretty hard. So let's hope that Jodi Arias doesn't, on some technicality or because of some good behaviour, somehow get to have the freedom that her ex-partner was so badly denied. Hope you've found that interesting. Obviously, remember guys, if you're in a relationship with somebody who is doing the kind of thing that Jodi Arias is doing, stalking you, going on your social media, threatening people that you're around, not willing to have friendships, basically walking into your home without any invitation, you got a problem. And if you really want that to stop, you need to speak to the authorities. When you intervene early, you tend to have a really good result. Because otherwise, people really could end up in the same way that Travis Alexander did. If you like what you've seen, please subscribe, leave me your comments. I love hearing from you. I love all this super chat, all the stuff that you get involved in, blows my mind. So stay tuned for more true crime with me, Emma Kenny.